Everything is simpler during childhood. What you're going to have for lunch can seem like the most pressing issue of your life, and subjects like politics are about as significant as a blade of grass. The boy in the striped pajamas attempts to show how childhood innocence reacts when confronted with an environment where state politics is designed to be the center of existence for everyone, man and child alike. The film is most famous for the tragic ending and is considered one of the most depressing films ever made, but there are other subtle character moments that explore not only the battle between innocence and evil, but also the psychological explanations for how a seemingly decent family man can be dedicated to the extermination of an entire race. It does not take long for the story to introduce the conflict between innocence and destruction. During the film's opening credits, we see Bruno and his friends playing on the streets of Berlin as Jews are loaded into trucks for transport, two of which appear to be Schmoll and his father. And at this time, Gretel is in a similar headspace to her brother. Her greatest concern is maintaining her dolls. This innocence is later displaced by a dedication to Nazism, as we will discuss. Now, the dialogue early in the film is very important because it introduces us to the primary rationale for what Bruno's father Ralph does for the SS. He appears to be a rational and loving family man. His children are well behaved. Gretel even asks God in her prayers to care for the children, sick and poor. And ironically, her father appears satisfied. Ralph's mother is also unhappy with Nazi policy, so it's not like he hasn't heard an opposition viewpoint. The key to his evil behavior can be derived from what he says to Bruno when Bruno asks why they have to leave their home. His father responds by saying, "Being a soldier is not about choices, it's about duty." Ralph is making the infamous specialization argument here, which would go on to be used unsuccessfully at the Nuremberg trials. Any group that wants success needs specialists. Nobody can be good at everything. During war, someone needs to fly planes, others need to fix tanks, and so on. But this arrangement allows people to pass moral culpability onto their superiors. German soldiers can point to the officers can point to the generals, and the generals can point to Hitler himself. The argument at the core is really one about free will. If you're in an honor based organization where you can be killed or imprisoned for disobedience, choice really doesn't exist. That's the argument. The only person with free will is the man at the very top. A beautiful counterargument to this theory has been made by Terrence Malick in A Hidden Life. Ralph will use the "I'm just following orders" excuse with his wife later in the film, but it's not the only tool he uses to explain away his actions. Once the family moves out to the enclosed woodland compound, we the audience are peppered with this visual motif, and I think it can be seen in a number of ways. For starters, it foreshadows how Bruno will encounter Schmoll, and it shows how Bruno is a quasi prisoner in this new home because his parents don't want him exploring. But most importantly, I think it shows how Bruno is imprisoned by a cultish ideology, unable to speak his own ideas. Once his mother Elsa becomes disillusioned with Nazism later in the film, we get to see her behind these metaphorical prison bars as well. So I suspect the director had the final meaning in mind. Before long, Bruno starts asking questions about the Jews, specifically Pavel, a man being used as a household slave. Now, his mother tries to mask the truth using the framework of his imagination. She tells him, yes, he's just a farmer in pajamas. But his father takes an alternative route.
The thing is, Bruno, those people, well, you see, they're not really people at all.
The tragedy at the end of the film is a result of Ralph being unable to convince Bruno of the Nazi view of Jews. Because kids think in black and white, there is no gray area. Bruno's favorite books are ones with knights in shining armor, heroes and villains. Ralph cannot find an explanation that fits that tone, so he simply says, "All you need to know is that we're doing what's best for the state." His father later hires a tutor that tries to convince Bruno that the Jews are villains, but Bruno has interacted with Jews by that point, and his experiences just don't line up with that presentation, so that line of attack fails. Bruno constantly tries to find answers to his questions, but the answers never satisfy. He even asks Schmoll, "Why did they take your clothes?" And all Schmoll can do is shrug. Children naturally look at their parents as heroes, and society is constantly telling Bruno that his father is a hero, so his mind can't process the reality that his father is actually the villain. When he sees a propaganda video that fits in with what he wants his father to be, he doesn't hesitate to accept it. The boy in the striped pajamas also does not shy away from trying to answer Bruno's question. Why did the Nazis take everything from Schmoll and his family? And the answer comes in probably the film's best scene, in my opinion. For the majority of the film, Rupert Friend's character, Lieutenant Coulter, is constantly on the offensive. He disparages Pavel every time he gets the chance and says some horrendous things to the disgust of Elsa. But during a dinner time conversation, he's put on the defensive. Ralph questions Coulter about his father's background and why he left Germany before the war, and Coulter has no answers for him. He's humiliated, weak, angry, and everyone around him are his superiors. And then Pavel shows up and spills a little wine. All of his personal anguish at that moment is thrown upon Pavel, the only person who can't fight back. This little character moment is reminiscent of the collective feeling in Germany that made the Holocaust possible. Germany was humiliated by the Allies in World War I, and then hyperinflation hit. The once great power was on its knees. And then someone came around and said, "We were not overcome by greater civilizations, we were betrayed, and history will not repeat itself if we take care of the traitors." And on an individual level, there are good reasons why people would be eager to accept this narrative. If you're racist or anti Semitic, no matter how pathetic you are, you'll always see yourself as above those groups by dint of your ethnicity. And that's why racism will never go away. It's a very effective method for preserving personal pride. Now, the most important relationship of the film is, of course, the one between Bruno and Schmoll. They meet under opposite circumstances. Schmoll goes to the camp fence to get some alone time, while Bruno is desperate for social interaction with anyone outside his new home. The friendship is much different than the one Bruno is looking for. They can't go on adventures, they can't even throw a ball back and forth. All they can do is sit there and talk. As their friendship grows, we get to see Bruno's sister become more and more infatuated with adult life. She spends all of her time around adults and soldiers, so the environmental pressure pushes her towards adopting that identity. She has nobody to enjoy her favorite interests with. If Gretel found a friend like Schmoll, she probably would have resisted those pressures a little bit more. By the end of the story, it is Gretel who wants to leave the compound. This is a result of her missing the simple life back home where she could enjoy her childhood. Although Bruno becomes good friends with Schmoll, when he's put in a position to defend him against injustice, he cowers in fear. It's a brilliant scene because most people like to think that they would stand up for what's right in that moment. But Bruno has no allies in that home. It is a no-win situation, and the tension is wonderfully displayed. And the scene echoes the moment in the Bible where various people ask Peter about his friendship with Jesus after Jesus is arrested, and Peter denies knowing him 3 different times. Another brilliant aspect of the story is Elsa's response to learning about the death camps. The truth just withers her away, and Vera Farmiga, who's a superb actress, does an excellent job showing Elsa's mental decline. And what is one way she tries to endure the pain? She goes on Bruno's swing. You get the sense that she's yearning to return to her childhood, a time when she could live in the moment without the stress of trying to balance family, morality, and responsibility. Elsa's impossible situation reminds me of something Nietzsche points out in Beyond Good and Evil. He says, "Something might be true while being harmful and dangerous in the highest degree, and the strength of someone's spirit can be measured by how much truth they can endure." It would be easier for Elsa to trick herself into believing the premise that Jews deserve to die and her husband is a hero. But she doesn't. She endures the harsh truth that she's married to an evil man. And that's a testament to her character, even though she doesn't revolt against the treatment of Jews completely. Now, again, the end of the film is what everyone remembers, but I don't think there's too much to say about it. Bruno enters a world that he knows nothing about, armed with nothing but the ignorance of childhood, and reality destroys him. But the question worth thinking about is this: would it be better for Bruno to spit in Schmoll's face the first time he sees him, and then go on to live for another 70 years in relative comfort, convinced that his father was the hero and Schmoll was the villain? Or is siding with innocence and goodness worth an early death? The Boy in the Striped Pajamas is different from many famous World War II era films. There is not a legendary director behind the camera, it doesn't try to do anything innovative from a visual perspective. It's a very traditional film, and the simplicity suits the story since we're following around a child. The simplicity also puts a stark focus on the characters and how they respond to their worldviews being shattered by the actions of Ralph and the regime that employs him. It has fable like qualities which make it very accessible. The first time I watched it was actually in school, and I'm sure some of you have as well. It's a great story for introducing the psychology behind the Holocaust, and I hope it's used for that purpose as time goes on. If you enjoyed this video, check out the analysis I did on Downfall. I focus on Hitler himself in that video and the ideas that supported his grip on the German people. It's probably the best movie made on that subject. And remember to like and subscribe on your way out if you're interested in more of this type of content. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I will talk to you soon.